to order on Monday, February 23rd at 6:30. And let's see, we'll just move right on from item 1 to item 2. You can tell my mindset is on village board meetings on Monday. Is there any discussion about item 2, approval of the January 26th? I'll be flipping back and forth, so be patient. I'll try to check for hands.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing no hands. Do we need a roll call vote, Bart?
Not for minutes, as long as we get a unanimous or a majority, we're good.
Bart, is everyone on the call except for President Rosick? Is Sangeeta here?
Sure, yep. So I have Barbara Riley Miller, Sangeeta Patel, Dan Wickland, Eric Kudo, Kathy Stokebrand, Nathan Beyer, Therese Klein. I see her on the screen, but I don't see an image, but I believe she is there.
Okay.
And then we have 2 members of the public and our applicant for number 3, Tom Bade.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's just raise our hands. All in favor of the motion with a hand? Looks like it's approved.
I'm
Thank
seeing
you.
everyone. I don't know, Therese, are you
Yeah.
able to?
I don't see her on my list of participants.
I believe she's the computer with Anne Decellier. Is that correct?
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Okay. And so, Anne, I'm sorry, Therese, do you want to just let Director Bart know your vote on the minutes verbally?
I'm hoping she can hear us, but if not, we can record it as that she did not vote.
Okay,
Okay,
Passes.
thank you. Moving on to item 3, consideration of parking special exception for proposed multifamily redevelopment at properties 2418, 2420, and 2428, submitted by Catalyst. And I'll hand this off to Bart at this point.
Sure. I do have a brief slide overview of the application, as well as the conditions within which your review should be guided by. I also have some additional information with respect to parking regulations and parking permits in the area that I was able to compile since distribution of the packet on Friday. So there's a bit of new information on here, but most of this is what was in the packet, just for an overview of those who are on the call here. Oh, that's not the one. 1 second, sorry. Got to pull it up apparently. Okay, you're all seeing my screen, is that correct? Let's look for someone to nod. Yep, sounds good. So item 3 is a request for a parking special exception. As indicated in the memo, this relates to a potential redevelopment of the 3 parcels that would be combined into one. All existing structures, which include the Sunseekers commercial building and the single family house on the corner of Stoll and Capitol, would be demolished to construct a 42 unit multifamily redevelopment, which would feature 4 stories, 3 apartments, stories, and 1 ground level parking. Up to 20% of those units would be affordable, which by my math makes it 9 units. 74 parking spaces are required per code at 1.75 parking spaces per unit. 43 are planned at this moment. The applicant has indicated a belief that providing 51 total spaces would be sufficient based on the number of bedrooms within the development. So in exchange for that, 8 of the other spaces that he believes are necessary would be accommodated through village on-street parking, which is available by monthly purchase. This is just an overview of the corner looking west down Capitol Drive.
And clarifying, that is a single family residence.
Correct. In my initial memo, I identified as a duplex. That was my mistake. I was contacted by a resident who asked me to update that in the packet. And so I have updated that in the amended packet. It is a single family residence.
And so are there 2 property owners that are involved?
Correct. Yep. The Sunseekers building and the parking lot to the west of that are owned by the same property owner. And then the residential house is a different property owner. So there's 2 within that the developer is working with.
Okay, so Sunseekers, there's actually like, so there's a parking lot on the west of the building and on the east of it, right?
Correct. Yep, the one in the west is a separate parcel.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Bart, when did you take that photo?
This photo,
Yep.
approximately 1 o'clock this afternoon.
Great, thank you.
Sure. As I mentioned in my memo, the previously or recently granted parking special exceptions are as follows. One point of clarification with respect to the commercial tenants particularly, these are the ones that we have in our existing database. Obviously, other ones have been given throughout the years, but that would require hand digging in each particular file to identify them. So what is provided is only since we started keeping track of them in an electronic database. With respect to multifamily developments, it's largely the same as well. You know, developments from the 60s or 70s, we don't have those in our database to understand whether or not they were provided or even required back then to have parking special exceptions. So these are just the most recently granted ones within the past 10 years or so. I don't need to go through all of them, but if we want to come back to the slide with any questions, I'm happy to do so, or we can take them now if anyone has any. I just wanted to provide this for reference. It appears that most recently multifamily developments were approved as planned development districts, which kind of is a different path than a special exception because it has other zoning things that are exempted, you know, for lack of better words. So with respect to this development, the developer believes that he can meet all other zoning requirements except for the parking. So he's applied for the parking special exception, but does not believe he needs one for anything else, such as height or setbacks or density or things like that. So once again, we can come back to this if anyone has any questions or if you'd like to.
I do have a question on that.
Sure.
So the commercial tenants up there, not knowing, is it generally a situation where they didn't have as many as they were supposed to by code? Do you know?
Correct. Yeah, most of our commercial buildings on Oakland Avenue don't have parking lots attached to them. And so pretty much any new use that substantially alters their space is required to go through that process. So most of these relate, North Shore Bank is a new building in and of itself. The Ruckus obviously was a major redevelopment. So if it's over 50% of the assessed value, they're required to go through this process. So many of these relate to large renovations, Casa de Cor zones similarly. So
Hey,
yes.
Bart, can you mute the other participants? I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Sure, let me go through here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
They might have muted themselves because.
No, it's Trustee Backhorst.
Oh, okay, got to get through the whole list.
Thank you for.
Oh. So any further questions on this slide, or would we like to move forward? I can come back to it, like I said, if there's any questions on anything else. Okay. And then, as I mentioned, this is an update from the information that was in your packet on Friday. I had a chance to go through and identify the daytime regulations within the area. So understanding that the exception is being requested, how would that work for tenants that need daytime parking? So anything south of Capitol Drive is within the residential commuter congested area. That does not allow for commuters to park in the area. So it's marked as 2-hour parking from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Of note, single family and duplex residents can receive daytime permits to park in the area. It is not open for those permits for multifamily property owner or multifamily property residents. So I'm guessing at one point that was an intentional inclusion, but I'm thinking perhaps that as we move towards the future and looking at inclusivity of renter populations, that might change over time. I have no magic ball or crystal ball on that, but the current policy is that single family and duplex residents of any property on Capitol Drive and to the south could purchase that permit. Multifamily residents currently cannot. And so north of Capitol is where we'd be looking at where these parkers possibly would be looking to park during the day. And so Farwell Avenue on the west side, Stowell Avenue on the west side, Richland Court on the west side, and Jarvis are generally unregulated throughout the day with respect to 2-hour limits. Downer and Prospect Avenue both have 2-hour limits. They've opted into an extension of the congested area. So Once again, residents on those blocks can purchase the permit, but those blocks are signed for 2-hour restricted parking throughout the day.
And Bart, that photo that you showed us was with all those cars was Stoll looking north, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Bart, even if we didn't have a prohibition against multifamily buildings, because this property faces Capitol rather than one of those north-south streets, would they be eligible to buy a daytime parking permit?
So I spoke with customer service on that, and my impression is that they would. Customer service obviously administers that, but the residential congested commuter area specifically includes the north side of Capitol Drive. So since this property would front that, if multifamily residents were allowed to purchase it, I think that would qualify them to be able to park in with any of those areas with that daytime permit.
Thank you.
We'll move on here. So there was also, we tried our best to get some overnight parking permission and permit numbers in the last 2 months. So as you're likely aware, the village updated our overnight parking permit policy last year to expand it more generally within residential areas. So bad colors for my particular angle here right now, but so the 3,900 blocks of Prospect, Stoll, and Downer were evaluated, as well as the 4,000 blocks. And then the 3 blocks on Capitol, 2,300, 2,400, and 2,500 Capitol. I don't want to go through this full slide here, but the approximate spaces for each of those districts are granted. That's based on an 18-foot free curb. And so no driveways, no fire hydrants. It is an approximation. It's the same methodology that was used for a transportation plan that was done 2 years ago. So with respect to that, 23 potential spaces are on 3,900 block of Prospect, 28 in the 4,000, and so on. And then what we did is we ran a list of, a report, I should say, of temporary permissions that were granted per license plate, and then permits that were granted in both January and February. And I had Crystal export that into an Excel document. We sorted it based on these blocks. And what we found is in January, 10 cars, license plates or permits were issued for the 3,900 block, 8 for the 4,000 block, et cetera. So this slide just kind of lays it out there. The most quote unquote congested block is the 4,000 block of Downer, which has approximately 38 parking spaces. In January, 20 of those were in theory occupied by either a temporary overnight permission or by a monthly permit, and 21 of those in February to date. I have asked the police department with their customer service officers to kind of confirm this information. Unfortunately, they had an incident last night that precluded the officer from going around the neighborhood, but they are going to do that within this week and the next week, I believe, to confirm that this in fact does match reality of what's parked out there. So this is just a general snapshot of the existing parking conditions at the nighttime level.
And so other than exemptions that were previously allowed, these are all new permits starting January 1, right?
Correct. These are all, so the village requires anyone parked on the street between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. on the weekdays to have a permit to park on the street. So these are vehicles that need to park on the street either based on lack of having, enough spaces in their backyard or in their property. So yeah, these are in theory what is out there. Once again, this has not been corroborated anecdotally. People can apply for a permit under a different address and park on a different block. So I have no reason to believe that it's not close to accurate, but I just want to provide that caveat that we have not had a chance to verify this with a verbal or with a visual, surveillance. And we can always come back to it if we have to. I'll just finish up this quickly. So these are the 13 conditions listed in your packet for which the Plan Commission should review the request. I will not go through them. They're in your packet once again, but we can bring this back up if you need it during your deliberations or discussion. And that's where I leave off. So I will give it back to Chair Stokebrand. So if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, you can lead your own discussion. And I can also stop sharing the screen too if you'd like to, be able to see yourselves. Is that preferable? Let's try that.
That would help me get back to my agenda.
Yeah. Figure out how to do that.
I'll minimize it.
Stop share. There we go. We should be back.
Okay, thank you. So staff does not make a recommendation here. You present it, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Let's see what input we have from commissioners. Do I have any questions from commissioners on the call?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I have a question, Bart, and I think, Eric was looking at Stoll there when you took the picture, and I've got it up on Google Maps. When you like whatever that list said, and there were 28 spaces, that's best case scenario, right? Because when I'm looking at cars parked on here between the driveways, it doesn't, my count isn't the same. So I'm assuming that's, hey, if we parked everybody perfectly, we could get 28 spaces, correct?
Correct. It's max capacity based on an 18 feet of curb. So you're right. If someone parks differently, that could go down to 22 or something of that nature.
Okay.
And so is that both sides of the street, right? You can park on both sides of the street there?
Only one on Stowell north of Capitol, only on the west side.
And of course, we all, I believe, got the, there was a letter from a resident. I'm sure everyone saw it. With concerns about this very thing. It's parking. I'm not sure so much traffic, but the parking issue. And I mean, I can certainly relate to that as someone who favors mass transit and fewer cars. The reality is a lot of people have to use a car to get to work. And our public transit may not be quite where we wish it would be, but anyway, that's how I have to have a lot of concern for the people living in that area with more cars coming out looking for parking because the developer, there aren't enough just to meet what we've said is required. Now, is that requirement something you could see changing if we do see more car sharing, more ride sharing, that kind of thing? Do you see that as an industry thing that's happening? We hear about millennials, younger people not buying cars.
I mean, yeah, that is a local policy that the board and the plan commission could look into and recommend, and the board could change at any time. It's not, based on any sort of larger standard. It's what we currently have in place. As you're aware, the plan commission has identified as a future initiative a review of the current standards. I can't say what that will reveal or identify either now or in the future, but correct, that is a village adopted standard that could change in the future.
I have a question, Bart. It's more maybe for the developer, but maybe, through the conversations or if they're allowed to answer, but it seems to me that it's designed to be self-contained, right? You have 42 units and 43 parking spots. So was that meant to be marketed as like you rent the apartment, you get one parking spot? And if you have extra cars, you either choose not to rent there or you buy municipal parking pass or pass from a neighbor. But I guess that's what I'm wondering is was it designed to be self-contained and that's why they only designed it for 43 spots?
Yeah, I would defer that question to Tom. He's on the call here if he's willing to answer that. First, I guess.
I'd be happy to answer. Let me say this. The way we typically develop apartments in most municipalities is one parking space per bedroom. Because one bedroom units are typically singly occupied, two bedrooms, typically a couple wanting more space. And in our buildings, we typically go with the number of bedrooms. You get the equivalent, you have the opportunity to rent the number of spaces. Parking spaces come with additional rent so that if you do not have a vehicle, you save that $100 a month or $75 a month for those. So yeah, and that's why we know that we need 8 additional spaces. We have 51 total bedrooms in the 42 units. And so we were looking for 51 spaces. I think if the number's right, 43 would be inside and the other 8 would be parked on the street is what we're suggesting or requesting. Did that answer your question?
It did. I guess I'm wondering, do you think it's not viable you've designed it in a way that there's 43 spots. Is it not viable? as a situation if, if you didn't get those 8 spots, is it viable still as an option to just say, well, if you rent the unit, you get, 1 spot, and if you need extra spots, you can go to a municipal lot or something, some other solution?
It is viable to do that, and we've done that in some other locations. And that's what we're doing here is, for those 8 additional spaces we think we'll need, we're suggesting the overnight parking passes with the village, that they would make use of that.
Okay, any other questions from commissioners? I mean, I guess obviously the question is, why not go down? It's your margin, right? Your margins?
Correct. We looked at going down, and we have 2 problems with it. One is the construction cost, but setting aside the cost, we just physically, we spend so much money building the ramp to get down. We end up wiping out a row and a half of spaces on the first level to put the ramp down. And then to make the turn when you get down below, because of the tightness of the site, we don't pick up as many spaces as the dollars dictate that we would have to spend for that. And we were trying to stay within the zoning guidelines there and be a little bit sensitive to the neighborhood on not asking to go up. That was something else we looked at. As you go down and add spaces to offset that, you'd have to add units perhaps going up. And that probably doesn't fit within the neighborhood character at all.
I did see Trustee Stokebrand, Barbara, Dan, and Therese had some questions, as well as Attorney Bayer had his hand up before too, if you'd like to rate, ask any.
I'll hand it off to you, Bart, because then you can see the hands better than I can.
Okay. I got Barbara in the upper, or Nathan, do you want to go first? Do you have a comment?
I did. Thank you. And I apologize. I wanted to jump in at the end of Bart's presentation, and I was having some technical difficulties. I wasn't able to. So I wanted to make, if I could, just a few brief comments about the request tonight, which is a special exception because it's been a little while since the Planning Commission has had the opportunity to consider a special exception. Normally, where a lot of times the conditional use requests are what are before the body. So we've talked about Act 67, which was passed in 2018, and that impact on conditional use requests. But we haven't really had an opportunity to talk about it for a while in this context of a special exception. So I just wanted to reiterate some changes that have been made by the legislature over the last 3 years or so. So to get back to the beginning, and I apologize if I repeat anything that Bart said because I was having some technical considerations. So just to kind of give the 30,000-foot overview, what we're talking about is these 3 properties on Capitol Drive are zoned B3 for multifamily units. Excuse me, it's B3, and multifamily units are existing permitted use in that area. So we're really just talking about the parking regulation. And what parking regulation are we talking about? For every dwelling unit under Chapter 535, there has to be 1.75 parking spaces per dwelling unit. And there's a second part of that they're asking for a special exception for. And the second requirement that there's a special exception being requested for is that all parking shall be in an approved garage. So here there's 42 units or dwelling units, which would under the existing code require, help me with my math here, 74 spaces, right, Bart? I've got
Correct.
that. Okay.
Yep.
So the requested exception is twofold. One, they want to have 43 fully enclosed stalls, and then an additional 8 spots would be allowed. They're asking for a special exception to have 8 spots on the street for a total of 51, which equals the amount of dwelling units that they would have, and for the reasons they described earlier. So the special exception in many ways is affected by Act 67, which was passed in 2018. So under Chapter 62, a decision to either grant or deny a special exception, just like a conditional use permit request, must be based upon what they refer to as substantial evidence. And under the statute, if the applicant meets or agrees to meet all of the requirements and conditions specified either in an existing ordinance or as determined by the body then the conditional use permit must be granted. So what does that really mean in terms of what the board is looking at? It means that if you've got your copy or you've got it online, under 535.51, there's a list of special exceptions, and it gives some conditions that are concerns for the body to consider. And if you believe,
Got
sorry?
it. Thank you.
Oh, sure. So it's 535.51, and it's titled special exceptions under off-street parking. So this is all within the zoning. So you can, if there's a link for anybody that needs some help or finding it on the main website for the village. If you look on the right side, there's a drop-down menu, and you can see one of those is village code. And then if you click on 535, it'll take you there. So in other words, what the statute is essentially saying is if based upon substantial evidence, the concerns that are raised or the issues that are raised there can be met. Based upon substantial evidence, they demonstrate that they can meet those concerns and address those concerns. Then under the statute, then it must be granted. If you find based upon substantial evidence that those concerns cannot be addressed by some alternative method, whatever is discussed, then you can deny the application. So I just wanted to explain, because the Planning Commission again has had that discussion many times when it comes to questions of conditional use permits, but I think this is the first time that we've addressed a request for a special exception since Act 67 was passed in 2018. So just wanted to give everybody a reminder, kind of a refresher course on those finer points. So I thank you for allowing me the opportunity. I apologize for interjecting after we had already gone into questions, but again, I was having some technical difficulties earlier. So if there's, and I'm here, I'll get out of the way now. And if anybody has any technical questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Nathan. I did share the 13 conditions in that section so that we can always go back to that screen if we need it. Barbara, I believe I have your hand raised next.
I won't ask all my questions in one sitting, but I'll come back to some of them. In a question that's kind of related to what Commissioner Patel asked, I'm wondering, this is for the developer, how are these spaces going to be assigned? Does each apartment come with one? Is it first come, first served? Are you not going to allow any for the studio apartments, so you have more for the 2-bedroom? Are there going to be some available for the affordable units? I'm just wondering how they're going to be allocated among the apartments you have. And lastly, you've got 43 spaces. Is one of those for like the building manager, so he or she has a place to park?
So your first question, how they get allocated.
Right.
And that would be, they would be allocated per unit per bedroom. So all of the 1 bedrooms would have 1 parking space reserved, and the 2 bedrooms would have 2 parking spaces reserved, up to until the last people that would, during rent up, when we initially bring it online, those last 8 people would then have to park on the street per our request, because we only have 43 spaces and we really need 51 spaces if we go with 1 parking space per bedroom.
So there's a maximum per apartment because of the bedrooms. But then
Correct.
again, if you run out, you're not going to hold some reserve for those last, say, 8 apartments.
They would rent up as soon as they could. Absolutely.
Okay. And then that extra space, the 43rd, is that for a building manager?
The building, I'll be honest, I hadn't thought about providing a space for the building manager, but ultimately we would have to. And the building manager for a building of this size would only be part-time.
Right.
They're about half the time during the week.
Okay. Bart, I have a question for you that's just kind of a tangential to this transaction. The current owner of the Sunseeker space has a number of large vehicles parked on the west side of that building for one of his businesses. Are those large vehicles going to be then parked in another Shorewood lot, or will they end up on the street?
I have no information on where those would be moved to. If they're parked in a Shorewood lot, either they're going to need to be, parked with a permit. If it's a municipal lot, I know previously some of those had been parked within the Light Horse parking garage. So If they can, if he desires to find a space in the village, we just make sure that it is up to code and regulations and has the proper permits and or screening that be required. But I have no information on where those will be moved to when this, if and when this would be redeveloped.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, they're a little bit larger than, your passenger cars. So that's, if they were on the street, it would take up a little bit of space on those, in city streets. Anyway, that's all I've got for right now.
Okay, I think Dan, I had you as with some questions next. Is that correct?
Yeah, I had some questions actually for Nate. It was nice to see him here, so I figured I'd just ask him questions. But he answered a bunch of them. But maybe I'll on some of those where in 535-51B, are we supposed to be weighing out other discussions we have too with some of these points? Like for instance, if you look at point 4, or point 6, we've had these meetings very recently where we're saying, nobody wants more 6-story buildings in Shorewood, right? So, now we have an applicant in front of us that says, hey, we looked at going up, but nobody wants us to go up. We can't go down because that's not cost effective. So in order to do a building here, this is what we have to do. And that's taking his word for it, right? But if we want more density, if we want more activity, if we want more people, is this the option? And then are we going to encounter this again every time someone wants to build a building if we're not letting them go up any higher? And should we be taking that into account is my question, I guess, Nate.
So I just want to make sure I'm answering your specific question right. You were referring to 535-51, one of the subsections specifically.
Yeah, I rambled a lot, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Number 4, so, serve the public, combined with the fact that there's number 6, recommendations of any boards or committees. We just had these discussions unrelated specifically to parking. We've had a lot of parking discussions over the years, but we've had discussions related to other things that kind of piggyback on this project. Again, like I said, do we want 6-story buildings anymore? There was this strong consensus when we were doing our plan, focusing around 6-story buildings. If we can't do that, and this is going to be the only solution, should we be taking that into account is the question.
Sure. No, that's a great question. And the advice that I would give you is to view it through the lens of how the change or not variance, that's wrong word, how the exception going from 1.75 parking spaces per dwelling unit down to whatever the ratio would be with 51 parking spaces for the 42 units, how that ratio would impact the village. And then in that context, then the question becomes whether the granting of the exception will serve a public or desirable or useful purpose. In other words, is it, going from a ratio of 1.75 parking stalls per dwelling unit down to a ratio of perhaps 1.5 or 1.4? Is the cost benefit analysis there? Does it serve a public purpose by giving us A, B, C, and D, with respect to our housing, the available housing in the area and in the village, and how does it impact the larger, sort of what the village is trying to do in the context of the master plan? So that would be my advice, is how to view it through that lens. And then your second question was, or related to sub 6, which says another consideration is recommendations of any boards or committees to which the Plan Commission refers the application for advice. In this particular case, I don't think there are any other boards or committees that the Plan Commission would refer the application for advice. But the example I think you gave with respect to 6 stories or 4 stories or whatever, I would just go back to what I said earlier, that this is zone B3. So it's already multifamily units are an existing permitted use. And the design, my understanding of what's being proposed, is totally and otherwise completely in line with the existing zoning. So no one's requesting to go greater than, Bart, can you help me out as to what the height limit is here in B3?
It's 4 stories.
It's 4, okay.
Yep.
So we're really not talking about 5 or 6 or 7 or anything.
No, I get that. I'm referring to dialogue we've had that you wouldn't have wanted to be involved in. So,
Okay.
that's all.
Okay.
I'm making a point as much as I'm asking a question, I guess.
Did I answer your question? Okay.
You did. Thank
Okay.
you.
Did Therese, did you have a question before as well? Just making sure I'm not missing anyone. Oh, and Sangeeta has her hand. Therese, I'll call on you because I saw you first. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm having some technical
There we
challenges.
go.
Computer number 3, found the button for mute. So I've been dropping in and out, and I apologize if this makes us go back. So looking at the parking layout, there's spots for ADA, it looks like 5 spots. And there's no flexibility on that? Or is there flexibility on that?
I believe those are designed to minimum code standards. Is that correct, Tom? In respect to the number that are provided?
Correct. We're meeting building code requirements.
Yes, we have building code, we have the village ordinances. Can all those move around, or is that fixed? We can't touch it?
Well, the village ordinance can be quote unquote touched through this special exception. The building code, I believe, is much more difficult with respect to adopted code standards. So those I don't know that at least the planning commission wouldn't have any impact on that, but you would have a right to discuss the exception for the village code because it is under the planning commission's purview to do that.
Okay.
And then you have more questions, Therese, or?
Nope.
Okay, Sangeeta. And then Trustee Stokman, we do have a member of the, and I see Eric, sorry. We do have a member of the public wanting to speak as well. So maybe we get to the planning commission first, and then I'll leave it to you to see if you want to open it up. Okay, Sangeeta.
I had a question about the 1.75 requirement. It seems to me like that, we always talk about how the parking policy seems outdated. Is that related to, if Shorewood just allowed street parking, right? So that it makes more sense that if you build something, then somebody rents an apartment, they could have 3 spots or 4 cars or whatever. And then it makes sense to regulate according to 1.75. I don't understand the basis for that 1.75. It doesn't make sense to me when we don't allow street parking, then it would just be limited to, I guess it's going back to my earlier point, if they have 42 spaces and they say we have 43 spots and they no longer have the ability to street park, then what difference does it make that the regulation, I don't understand why the regulation then would be 1.75. Does that make sense at all, what I'm saying? Like, what's the basis for 1.75?
Yeah, I'm sure the 1.75 was calculated, decades ago by, industry standards with respect to how many, an engineer did a survey in a multifamily building in a city somewhere that identified that was the typical need on those, units. And then just over the decades, years, whatever, other municipalities have adopted similar regulations. So I have no reason to believe the 1.75 was crafted specifically with Shorewood in mind. We very likely probably just adopted it because either, Brookfield or Milwaukee or Cleveland or someone else did. So we do have the right to make that fit our local needs. So if in Shorewood, if we had a more robust public transportation system, we could take that down. If we're out in New Berlin where we don't have that transportation system, obviously the needs will be different. So I don't have an answer to where it comes from necessarily, but I would suspect that it's not locally derived.
Thanks.
Eric, I think I had you next.
Sure. So this is a question for you, Bart, and maybe for Nathan. I'm looking at page 30 of 36 in the Central District Master Plan. First paragraph, the block is projected to be mixed use, although its official zoning has remained open to multifamily uses on all floors. How much guidance should we be taking from the Central District Master Plan when trying to determine whether or not this is an appropriate special exception? And I guess I would also go down to the following paragraph of 2400 block of East Capitol Drive, the first sentence. Is that is that part of our decision-making process, or is this just?
So just one point of clarification too that we've discussed within the comprehensive planning exercise. Land use and zoning seem like they're the same thing, but they're not, right? So the Central District Master Plan has identified its desired land uses, but what actually controls the land use, or what actually controls the use in Shorewood is the zoning. So the land use in the Central District Master Plan does identify mixed use as its desired, end state. However, zoning still allows for all multifamily. So if the village through the plan commission or otherwise wanted to specifically match the land use, they would have to change the zoning to disallow multifamily on all stories. So I don't know that it plays into how
So the answer is no.
Yeah.
Don't take it into consideration.
I think you, maybe I defer to Nathan. I think you could if you're looking to, I'd have to bring the 13 points back up. If you're looking to support land use decisions, so land use is different than zoning. It is allowed per zoning to not have mixed use. But if the plan commission, seeks the identified land use, I think that is something that could be referenced. I don't know if Nathan, if you agree with that or not.
Well, I'll just read you the exact language out of 535-51 and whether the granting of the exception will serve a public or desirable or useful purpose. So in that context, as you interpret it, but it's the granting of the exception, with respect to the parking, not sort of the overarching, do we like or do we not like the overall intent or purposes of the development, because again, that clearly meets the existing zoning. So, you have to take these sort of individually. And then, and then another one that follows, whether the spirit and intent of the requirements of the article are being carried out. So, all these kind of play together, and you have to sort of look at 535-51 and ask each those individual questions in the context of the specific exception that's being requested with respect to the parking. Going down, it's twofold. Again, going down from that ratio of 1.75 to, I didn't run the math, but I think it's around 1.4, 1.5, and then the second question is those last 8 that would not be off street but on street. So there's really two parts of it.
Okay, thanks. I was just looking for guidance. Thank you.
I still see Barbara with more questions, and then public next.
Thanks, Bart. I had marked that same paragraph that Commissioner Kudo just brought up, and I think it's because I kind of skimmed through our most recent draft of the comp plan, and we described that section of Capitol Drive as kind of mixed use Main Street or Main Street mixed, whatever. And we have kind of specific goals and design goals. However, since it's only in draft form, even though we have a vision for what it should look like, we really probably should not let that govern our decision-making, since it's not been approved by the village board and we haven't changed the zoning if need be. Just want to confirm that.
Correct. Yeah, it's not adopted for one thing, and then even if and when it is adopted, the zoning still stands as is until that's modified. So although the draft plan shows it as Main Street mixed use, the zoning still allows it. So regardless of its adoption or not, the zoning is what would dictate actual use there.
Okay.
And that consideration doesn't have anything to do with parking either. So that would be another reason.
Right, well, except when we get to some other questions I have. And Bart, on the top of that same page 30 in our packet, I wanted to know if you could explain like those first 2 paragraphs where it's talking about the side setbacks within the commercial district are required to be reviewed in a plan approved by the Plan Commission to see whether it's appropriate due to parking considerations and the layout of the intersection. And then it mentions the general rear setback from an alley is 5 feet, and I wondered what alley, and 10 feet from a property line adjacent to a residential district, and the proposed redevelopment abuts both. The proposed redevelopment's rear setback is 10 feet and would be conforming. So if you can just tell us, so is the plan in compliance with the rear and side setbacks?
Correct. As proposed, it is in compliance with respect to the corner setback. The zoning code requires the plan commission confirm that setback for vision triangle safety issues. So as drafted, it is conforming unless for some reason the plan commission finds that that corner is atypical from its standard corner. And so if there'd be a generator or something there in the public way that would provide additional, distance or site issues. But that is in the code that the plan commission will need to confirm that, but they do meet what is in the code currently. The plan commission would just need to confirm that upon of application that nothing there is atypical that would require a greater setback, for example.
Okay, and then I had a couple remaining questions for the developer. I know it's early stages, but I'm just wondering if you've done any preliminary exterior designs, because I'm wondering, will the parking structure be screened or shielded from the adjacent homes, especially the one just to the north of it, besides some shrubbery that's shown on the plan, the site plan. And as pedestrians are walking down the sidewalk, is there going to be any kind of design work, in the open area? I'm especially thinking about the homeowners next to it who might have, car headlights, auto exhaust, aimed towards their house. So I'm just wondering, if you've thought about those issues, the exterior of it, and how those issues might be addressed.
Sure. So you had a couple of questions in there. One will take the neighbor to the north. So they're on the north side of the alley. Right now, the way it's planned is that north wall that runs east-west of this building would be a solid wall.
I'm sorry, what was that?
It would be a solid wall
Okay.
with the appropriate fenestration, if you will, whatever we decide the siding will be. We purposely located the entry off a stole rather than off the alley to kind of minimize the impact to the neighbors to the north. Your other question was to the south, what it would look like along Capitol Drive.
Right.
And I will say we have not done anything in terms of renderings or color selections or what that looks like. We've only done a massing study, but I do believe it's in the code, Bart, and our plan is to certainly make that front way look kind of like a storefront, if you would, along there. It'll be broken up with some glass and some other things so it doesn't appear to be a monolith along there. What that particularly is, you want an architect to decide, not me, but that's
okay. And then thinking about any possible traffic congestion at Stoll and Capitol, there's two ways to enter and exit the parking garage. And I'm just wondering, is each one wide enough so a car could be entering as another one is exiting, so people are not being held up?
Yeah, that's part of why to make sure we meet all the building codes and then make it a little bit more comfortable for turning in and out of the locations. Those driveways, I think, are 22 feet wide, which is more than adequate for two vehicles to pass.
Great, thank you. And is each spot, does each particular tenant who gets a spot, are they assigned one spot? So they're not, every day having to go in and out and hunt for a place to park.
They'll be reserved spots because along with that, they'll probably have some storage lockers at their parking location as well. So.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I think Trustee Stokebrand, was your hand raised before?
It was. So at what point in the discussion with the village, or maybe it's not a point of discussion, would there be concerns about, I think as Barb talked about our comprehensive plan, how we want to be pedestrian friendly. And obviously I think a lot of us would like to see a storefront on the level instead of a parking garage. I mean, we have the Ascension property that is now a vacant parking structure. It's a parking structure with the building on top. And so where in the process would this come into play, or because it meets the code, would that be a design review question? Or is that totally off the table because this meets code for everything but parking?
So yeah, currently the design review board would review this against the commercial district, central district master plan design guidelines, which does require screening of ground floor parking or surface parking. So, I mean, the Light Horse, the Walgreens development, it's just kind of a similar surface lot with, different kind of openings there that went through design review board. So under the current, zoning in place, that would be the process where that would be discussed and designed and debated. And obviously we have architects on that board who, similar to Tom's point, would know better than I would with respect to what materials would perhaps be optimal on that. Moving forward in the future, this is where we talk about form-based code a lot. So in the future, if we do move towards form-based standards, it's something that we could suggest within the code to say ground floor parking must be screened in this fashion or must be limited in this fashion. Our current code doesn't have those kind of details. So once again, the form-based code kind of helps define the character that we're looking for. Right now, we don't have that. We do it through design review or design guidelines. So I'll keep mentioning, and I think I've already convinced most of you, if not all, but I think that we need to look towards moving towards form-based code in the future to help us get through these a little more easily and even, I mean, quite honestly, give the developer more guidance on what we're looking for. So rambling answer right now, design review board. In the future, I hope form-based code will help us solve that problem.
Thank you, Bart. And then I had one question for the developer. I noticed on B1, there was a comment about the effect on adjacent parking and traffic that due to the residential nature of the building, overall traffic congestion will decrease from the current commercial uses. Could you explain how that's supposed to present itself?
Yeah, our thinking was, and I've had a preliminary discussion with a traffic engineer just to kind of go through a trip generation plan. The number of people that leave in the morning and leave in the evening that go off to work. It's no, with those early morning hours and late evening hours, it's nowhere near the 40 some spaces that would be parked in there. And with that, there'll be far fewer trips to this lot on the business for Sunseekers, the folks that come and go from there on a regular basis during the day. The short trips, that was the phrase I was trying to think of. There'll be far fewer short trips that go in and out of that commercial property. It'll be limited to the traffic in and out of Stoll and the residents, and just a few trips in the morning and then in the evening for folks leaving and coming to going to work.
And so did COVID come into play? I don't know when you started on this, but I'm just wondering about, so Sunseekers was probably closed due to COVID, right?
It's,
Yes.
yes,
More people working from home.
right.
So is it a wash?
I couldn't give you an honest answer on that. I was just working off of what we've typically seen.
So I would say to the people who have contacted us and said, I don't want all this traffic on my street. You have 8 units, I believe, that have no parking.
Correct.
They're going to be parking in front of my house. What would you say to those people?
I would go back to, and there's a little bit anecdotal, the chart that Bart put up, that there is more than sufficient parking there other than a couple of peak moments on those different streets to provide that. And most of those spaces and those people that park there don't come and go a lot. The vehicles will stay there. The traffic won't be that great, but there will be parking spaces occupied.
I guess the other consideration is with COVID and the increase in online sales, we have all seen the increase in Amazon, the food delivery. And in that regard, I would say that the use of the street and parking has only increased with COVID and people working at home. And so that makes this a tougher pill to swallow.
Understood. And I got my fingers crossed that COVID doesn't go on forever and we get back to a bit more normalcy. I'm hoping. The other thing I would add, especially on the deliveries to the apartment, is that because of the way we structured the entry and exit of the garage, we're given back spaces on Capitol Drive right now that are taken, along with the 3 spaces, I think. 2, I think it's 3 spaces. And then the traffic that goes in and out on Capitol, in and out of Sunseekers, will be reduced as well because those turn-ins will no longer be there. So it'll create a bit of a better pattern on Capitol, and then the deliveries to the apartments would all happen off of Capitol into the building and not on the side residential streets, because the package room will be at the main entrance on the south side of the building.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I see Eric still. We got plan commissioners. I see Eric. If any other plan commissioners are next, raise your hand. I can call on you next.
Yeah, I just have a really quick question about the affordable housing. Obviously not touching on any of the TIF or any incentive requests or anything like that. When you're looking at the 20 up to 20% of affordable housing in this development, are you also going to offer up to 20% sort of reduced rate parking spots for those potential tenants?
Yes, without going too far into the details, what we're going to propose is that we follow the WIDA requirements for those affordable housing because they're clear, and the developer and the Village of Shorewood can agree to those terms and what that would be, and that would require the same there. What we also find that is with a certain number of the affordable units and a few of our 1-bedroom units, that most of those tenants do not have a vehicle and they use public transportation. That's another reason why this site's a bit particularly interest to us, because it's at least on a bus line.
Okay, thanks.
Barbara?
As for those affordable units, if someone meets the income requirements, are they able to rent 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom studio, or are you going to limit those affordable units to the smaller apartments?
No, and again, what we'll propose is following the WIDA requirements, which is the next available unit. So if we are at 20%, one of those affordable moves out, and that the next available unit that's available to make sure we meet that 20% limit or whatever that threshold we agree on would be available. So it's we don't just allocate these 5 units over in the corner. It's whatever is available, 1 or 2 bedrooms.
Sangeeta, and then I do have one member of the public still, so I'm trying to just be conscious of that.
Okay, sorry, just a quick question. You know what we did when we approved Casa de Corazon, where we made conditions for approval? One of those conditions was their employees would park off site. The other was, and not in the neighborhood. And then the other was their placement for their delivery vans. Are we allowed to approve based on conditions like that? Like, are we allowed, do we have to accept the plan as they're proposing, or can we make conditions like we did with Casa de Corazon?
Could impose reasonable conditions that are based upon the catchphrase here, substantial evidence. Yes, you can.
Okay, thank you.
We didn't hear that first part, Nathan, but I believe you said reasonable conditions. Is that correct?
So, yeah, you can, yes, absolutely. You can impose any reasonable conditions that are based upon substantial evidence in the record, and yes, you can do that.
Okay, my public member lowered her hand for now, so I will go back to Eric. Oh, no, Therese?
I have a question. Is we're talking about people who maybe don't need parking spots and can use alternate modes of transportation. If I was living there and I had a bike, where would I park it if I don't have a parking spot to store my bike?
If I can answer that, we haven't figured that out quite in the layout, but we have to provide, per the building code, we have to supply X number of bike parking spaces as well. And we've still got to fit that in a bit in terms of, if you're looking at the plan, the northeast corner, there's a refuse room and some space there. And then we might have to take a little bit of space out of the lobby to do that. But we have to provide a certain amount of bike parking. And then on top of that, we typically supply some bike storage someplace for folks that don't use them all the time, because we know that, especially on the east side, most tenants have a bike.
Okay, I will, Trustee Bockhorst has had her hand raised for quite some time, so I'll go to her right now.
Thank you. This has been very informative. A couple of things that I'd like to touch upon. I believe it was Mr. Wickland had mentioned before, and I don't think that you said this with much conviction, but that yes, that you've heard there's not an appetite necessarily for 6-story developments in this village. I'm not sure where you've heard that from, but we will have a very different board in a couple of months, and the chatter around 6 stories have been built in this village, and will continue with the most likely with the vision that we have from Vision 2025. And I think someone else had mentioned, I don't know if it was Eric, regarding the lack of approval of your plan. You're right. Until the board adopts it, it doesn't exist in our eyes. So those requirements that you're putting forward, we will obviously evaluate and review, but we haven't had this brought to us yet as a village board. I know that we have trustee Stokebrand, who is a newer trustee and has asked a lot of great questions tonight that, you know, we have covered in many meetings in the past regarding development, et cetera. But I can't expect you to know that, trustee Stokebrand, because you are new to the commission as well as the board. But yeah, no, this is an exciting project. I'm very inspired by the questions that I've heard tonight, especially around my multimodal, especially around the reduction in car culture, and also a lot of good questions regarding parking. So I would say that going back to the original mission of this planning commission regarding what is in front of you tonight, it's great to hear all of these questions, because these are questions that have come before us as trustees. These are questions that I'm sure all of you have heard on social media elsewhere, but I would not say that there is not an appetite for higher density in this municipality. We don't know. And these are great questions to put out there, but to say that yes, people want or don't want 6-story buildings, that's not been confirmed. I do appreciate, again, also the questions around TIF and the need for it. The fact is that the developers do not have to come to you other than for the parking restrictions that we have in place, which I feel is a very antiquated code that we have. We are one of the municipalities that we are close to Milwaukee. Milwaukee does not require this amount of parking that we do in Shorewood. Milwaukee, however, has done something that has predated Shorewood, and that is allow on-street parking for a long time. And they allow it for, I believe it's $25 every 4 to 6 months, which we do. We just opened up at $40 a month. And we will look at that. We will continue to look at those parking situations going forward. I know that might not help you tonight, because in front of you tonight, this project is asking for an exception to what previous boards have put in place regarding parking. But I think most of us are pretty progressive and are visionary and see that these might be onerous codes built on a more of a car culture, a different time and place. So not only in this, so the comprehensive plan draft that has been mentioned several times tonight, I can't wait for us to review that at the board and discuss it and determine whether or not it's something we want to adopt. And also the Central District Master Plan that Eric had brought up earlier. That's great, that you're right. You don't have to use that. You don't have to take that. And that could be revised as well as our Vision 2025. So there was one other point I wanted to make, or even a question, but even with the Casa de Corazon example that I believe it was Sangeeta, I think that's your name on the screen, had brought up. And I'm glad that you guys did review that, because I know initially you had voted no on the Casa de Corazon and it was brought back to you. So it's great to see this process. And as a board member, actually the longest standing board member on the village board, if you do have any other questions and you want to ask and get our pulse, go ahead, or get at least mine, because I will be on the board again next year with trustee Stokebrand and the 2 to 3 new members. So thank you.
Okay, I see no current hands. I see some other people on the phone, members of the public. If you would like to speak, you can either raise your virtual hand and I can see it, or unmute and go ahead. Otherwise, trustee Stokebrand, I'm not seeing anyone else with their hand raised right now.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, trustee Stokebrand, one last comment. I'm sorry. I'll keep it short. You had asked before what we say to people when they say, I don't want someone parking in front of my house. I think the answer is the same thing that we always say as fiduciaries and elected representatives. You don't own the street. You don't own the space in front of your house. That's public space. So I get it that there might be some people that have a problem with people parking in front of their home, but none of us own it, nor should we, nor can we. So that's the simple answer to that. You don't own it.
I think the problem is congestion and people trying to move about their neighborhood.
Maybe.
Okay. Is there anyone else who has a comment? I did have a question. So the developer, you've got a couple of spots in Milwaukee. I'm not sure with the same investors. You are doing underground other places. I know we have underground parking in Shorewood and other locations. are you doing some of these in other locations?
Doing some of what, underground parking or surface parking?
Underground
We are doing that in other locations. You are correct.
in Milwaukee?
In Milwaukee and in other municipalities. The difference is that those parcels are larger and support far more units.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Any other comments from, and we all had received the one letter. Was there anyone else that had received any comments from residents that anyone would like to talk about? No? Okay. And I see no other hands up. So is the board looking for more discussion, or is someone ready to make a motion?
Dan, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I figure we can maybe have a little more discussion about this first. I know we were asking questions, but I did, and I don't know if Bart, if you've looked, I know Shorewood is the best place on earth, and the other municipalities don't matter, but I went and looked at some of the other municipalities and kind of what they have, because we've had this parking discussion over and over again. I mean, it's not every time, clearly, but it comes in front of us a lot. And a lot of the other municipalities, for instance, on a studio or one bedroom, it's one parking spot, and on a 2-bedroom, it's 1.5 parking spots. So if you do the math here on that, that would require 43.5 parking spots, under someone else's, a similar municipality's current code. So it still doesn't fit in, but it's pretty close. So we've talked about many times how we probably do need to update, our parking code here to kind of match the realities of today and the realities that we do want more development here. If we're excited about new development, if we want 6-story, 12-story, I don't care the story building, it doesn't matter. But if we want these things, I think we really do need to, and we've been doing this as a group, talking about it, we need to update these things so someone doesn't have to come in front of us. Not that it's not nice to talk to everybody, but it'd be nice if it was clear for them ahead of time. And so that's my comment in looking at this, because I think we clearly want more development, especially on a corridor like Capitol Drive, and especially in that area. I think it'd be very beneficial. But we do have to also, again, weigh the residents, and it is congested over there. I get that. So I just wanted to have that discussion maybe and see if we need to talk about that at all. If not, I can also make a motion if no one else has anything.
I did have one other comment. I had a question for the developer. I believe on page 20 of your proposal, you talk about under 3, creation and retention of jobs. Letter A talks about several full-time equivalent management and maintenance jobs. I believe earlier you said that the manager would not be full-time. I'm guessing the maintenance, tell me about item 3A, creation and retention of jobs, and the several full-time FTEs.
Yeah, and what
The parking issue, irrelevant to the parking, it's only relevant for parking, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the FTEs and the creation of those, what we were thinking is largely the maintenance people and all of the different folks that come and go very much on a part-time basis that add those up, right? So in the evening, we have a couple of cleaners that will come through and clean the common areas. There's the maintenance guy that comes through and deals with the long-term maintenance, changing filters and all of those things. There is the name escapes me. We have a group that comes through and deals with tenant concerns, right? Fixing this, fixing that, painting the units, cleaning those things up. And as you add those all up, that's how we get to several full-time positions along with the manager. And then there's the position back of house as our asset manager, collecting the rents and paying the bills and taking care of all of those things. So some of those are on site, some of them are off site. None of them, I can't imagine more than 2 or 3 people being there on site at any one time. They'd probably be parking in front of the building or be parking in one of the unused stalls during the day because they would have tools in their truck and need to unload and those kinds of things. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. I see. Thank you, Bart.
Bart, I really appreciated you pulling those parking and permit statistics for us so quickly. They were a little hard to see on the chart, when you had it up on the screen. And I guess I would like a chance to study those a little bit more. And you said the police department was going to confirm availability or the number of parking spots taken up with nighttime parking. Yeah, I don't know if I need new glasses. There's only so much room on the iPad here.
Yeah, no, you're correct. I was able to pull these up. Crystal and I worked on them yesterday and today, so I didn't have a chance to get them in the packet before that. And yeah, Chief Nimmer did request his staff to, do a survey of the area. They weren't able to get to it last night because they had a different issue to attend to. So that is correct. I don't have the anecdotal evidence right now.
Hey, Bart,
Okay.
can I ask something about that, Barbara, while you're on the topic? In case I missed you saying this, are the temp, when I see temp January, are those people calling in for temporary permission?
Yeah, those are the 20 spaces each license plate is given per year. So we tend to see higher numbers in January and February of those because people try to use those up, or not try to, but people end up using those up first. And we're expecting that later in the year, they'll have to actually purchase the monthly permit. So it's the first year we're doing this, but my guess is we'll see higher temporary permissions earlier in the year, and those will change over to permits later in the year. But the total number, I imagine, will be roughly the same because it's the same people need it with the same needs.
Right, but for the actual people buying permits, though, it's minuscule compared to people calling for overnight permission, clearly.
On these particular blocks, I would agree.
Okay.
And since the tenants of this multifamily building are not eligible for a daytime parking permit on those congested streets, could you show us again? They'll be clustered on Stowell, Jarvis, and what other street?
Yep. If anyone without a dedicated spot needs to do that with the current regulations, they'd likely be looking at Farwell, Jarvis, Stowell, Richland, or even north of Jarvis. It's pretty open up there, quite honestly, in my visual walkthroughs. So those are the current streets. These other streets, in the future could qualify for that that daytime restriction as well. I believe it's a choice that they kind of opt into if they have enough evidence and signatures of doing that. So it is possible that perhaps Farwell or Stowell or Richland in the future becomes regulated with that if we keep the same policy. But once again, I can't guarantee that we'll keep the same policy of not allowing multifamily renters to purchase that permit either. So this is just what we have today where I see it.
Yeah, and I really wouldn't be that concerned about, where tenants are going to park during the day, except that, it is kind of adjacent to this large congested area with the parking time limitations. And because over this last year, so many people have had to work from home or school their children at home during the day. And I think a lot of employees and employers are thinking, we might like to continue this post-COVID too, because it's so convenient, and rather than paying expensive commercial real estate prices for offices. So I guess I would like to see what I'd like to look at these numbers a little bit longer and see what the police department comes back with. So I would like to make a motion to defer a decision on this exception to our next meeting.
I'll second it. And is there any other discussion? I did have a question. I'm looking at that map and I couldn't quite, I know we have problems around St. Roberts at drop off and pickup time, and they queue, what's the block where they queue the cars for pickup? Is that Farwell? There's always a long line of cars. It starts, is it on Farwell? It goes north on Farwell, snakes around Jarvis, and sometimes goes all the way around to Maryland.
Yeah, I'm less familiar, but Farwell would be the street where you would enter into the parking lot, I believe, to pick up children from the parking lot.
Yeah, I've seen that problem, and I know the people on Farwell are upset about that. Okay, is there any other discussion? Let's see, I'm trying to get my, apologies, trying to get my, Trustee Bockhorst.
Thank you. There were commissioners that raised their hand. When they're done, I'll speak if that's okay.
Certainly. Who else? Commissioners, I'm looking and I don't see.
I'm seeing Teresa and Sangita.
Okay, so
Sangita was first.
I'm going to pass this to Bart then because
Okay.
I'm having technical difficulties.
No problem.
Bart.
Yes, Sangita, go ahead.
I guess I'm really confused why the concern is over people parking in daytime spots or congestion. I would assume that if you're renting a unit there, you're parking in your spot, in your building. I really do see it. To me, the issue is the 8 extra spots. I do agree that the area is congested, and asking for 8 overnight spots, knowing that people are going to want to park as close to the building as possible. It is a room for increased congestion. If it's self-contained, I don't really have a concern with the parking. I feel like tenants are going to park there, they're going to rent, knowing how many parking spots they're allotted. I don't understand why someone would, rent there knowing they have a need for 2 cars, but only having 1 spot and not having figured out how or where they're going to park their second car overnight. So to me, the greater issue is the 8 extra spots. And that's why I was asking if the potential to do something like Casa Corazon, meaning that they don't get the 8 spots, they're self-contained. If there's a need for additional spots, the tenants have to, or the developer has to figure it out for the tenants, or, they lose that renter. That's their problem. But the question I guess I don't understand is, if you live in a multifamily unit and you need a car, can those people purchase overnight parking spots?
Correct, they can. Yep. So the village board changed that starting January 1st. And so in the past, there was a very complicated special system that had a percentage of units and et cetera. And it was unwieldy. And I think the board agreed it was inequitable towards those buildings. And so, yes, any resident right now, single family, duplex, multifamily can purchase the monthly permit.
So that changes the equation considerably in that, in terms of how many potential people might request additional spots in that area. Right.
Correct. The additional requests could come from single family homeowners just the same, or a duplex. And so this is just adding.
If there's 40 units and
Yep.
they decide to have 2 cars, that's 40 additional cars within the area that could purchase parking spots.
Yep, and that was the intent of trying to show the data of what's actually out there currently. So that's where that data came from.
Okay, thank you.
And then Therese, you were next, I think.
Yeah, I had a question. I was trying to understand why the proposal to defer the deliberation here here's what I heard. Let's defer it until we have the police drive by and look at how many cars park a single day during COVID. I don't know how relevant that is in the big picture, to have a single day point of data for that. So what are we trying to understand there, if I could ask?
I will just say that it does seem like a lot of people were taken aback by this. And I'm wondering if it would be a good idea to get some more feedback, because obviously this would be something that would be there for a long time. I think some people were able to see it in local media, which is revolutionary. But I wonder if we're getting the feedback that we, having it, I think first, when did the agenda come out, Bart?
Friday afternoon, correct.
Okay, so Friday afternoon, and we're supposed to make a decision on parking on Tuesday for something that will be here for a long time. I guess I can see waiting to make sure we've given the public time to provide input.
Trustee Bachhorst, did you have your hand still raised? No one else is.
Well, actually, Wickland does.
Oh, sorry. Yep. Dan, sorry, I missed you.
Yeah, no problem. You could have taken our first, but I just want to say on the motion on the floor here, I mean, I just think that, Barbara, your questions are valid, and information's always great, but there's a ton of information in the packet. And one thing, I think we brought up the Corazon thing. One thing, if we're going to want, to be friendly to new development, it is nice, again, if there's clear rules in place. And then if they can come here and know that we're going to make a decision too. I remember in that Corazon one, I think that guy had traveled from Minnesota and we're like, let's push this off now. again, I don't think in this case anyone's traveling from Minnesota, but it's just nice if we can put our heads together and figure something out with the information in front of us. And it'd be great if we could do that tonight. That's just my opinion, though.
Trustee Bockhorst.
I see trustee Keller Miller, I mean, not trustee,
Oh,
excuse me.
Sorry,
Miller,
I'm missing
sorry.
people, I guess.
I want to be respectful to the order.
I
Barbara?
don't need a promotion. Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying, Dan. And I guess I would disagree with Sangeeta just a bit, that I think people buy houses. My niece bought a house that did not have a garage. I think people rent, especially on this side of town or the east side, places that don't have parking provided all the time. So I guess that was, just since we're only 2 months into the nighttime parking, we're not going to have the clearest data, whether it's tonight or whether it's next month. But when we're thinking, I mean, the first point is, that we have to consider is, will granting the exception, what effect will it have on adjacent parking and traffic conditions? I just want to make sure that we've considered, every possible option. If it was in another part of the village that did not have such restricted parking, I probably wouldn't need to think about it quite so much.
Any other plan commissioners right now? Seeing none, trustee Bockhorst, do you want to give it a shot this time?
Yeah, thank you. And I really appreciate, again, the discourse. I like what a few members have said regarding equity and inequity. We're talking about renters here. We shouldn't punish them necessarily for not conforming necessarily to a pro-car culture society. So I think the developer was pretty clear. The village board has made big strides in lessening the overnight restrictions. We will be looking at the daytime restrictions in a variety of areas. I'm going to reiterate, no one owns the street in front of their house or their apartment, et cetera. What we do have, though, is we have the ability to change code, change zoning, and as well as offer loading zone and special accommodations. I'm not advocating for or against this. I am very intrigued by this meeting tonight. And I also understand the frustrations that have been brought to this board over the last 5 years regarding new development. I'm not sure if any of you commissioners have been on the planning commission when there was new development proposed. But this is, as I think it was Mr. Gribbenthal had mentioned, you guys haven't had to deal with this a lot. Your charter tonight is dealing with the parking. Knowing that the village board we have lessened our overnight parking restrictions. Yes, we are in a pandemic. Yes, some people decide that they're going to work from home. They might want to park nearby. But I think we're talking about potentially some affordable housing units here, right? We're also talking about requiring a development to provide 1.75 spaces per unit or per bedroom. I can't remember exactly what it is. When we have studios, and many of you tonight, so I'm a little confused, have mentioned that there is a difference with millennials and others in so much as their requirements regarding owning vehicles or multiple vehicles. Also, I hear a lot of words kicked around regarding public transportation use, using of bicycles, et cetera. So what do we want to promote? Do you guys want to go with our vision, which is a municipality that welcomes people from all walks of life, that's looking for multimodal and intermodal kind of transportation options? Or does Shorewood want to be known as the 2-car family per unit, or even in this case, per efficiency household? I can tell you that, I also have heard that a motion to defer. We have deferred so much in the Shorewood Village Board because we're waiting. At some point, we have to make a decision. And I think, I can't remember who it was who had mentioned that, yeah, it's a pandemic right now. We're not going to get proper data by having the police drive by on Stoll, Capitol, et cetera, to find out how congested it is. However, we do have a traffic and circulation study, and those results, I know all of you have that. I imagine this was provided as part of your packet decision making. So I hesitate to agree with deferring this based, and I'm not on this commission, but I am on the village board, but based on that, you don't have enough information. What more information would you need in order to get you to a decision? Because we're waiting on the village board to see where you guys are going with this. And I guess, yeah, but I'm going to just bring it back to equity. Let's go back to equity here. The charge in front of you is to determine whether or not this parking exception could be met. Now, this particular developer could decide to build without a TIF, especially because then that won't require board approval, 2 stories of parking. And then 2 stories of, and I know that that would not meet the return on investment, would not profit the development. But I'm just saying, like, make a decision, please. That's it. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to be aggressive here, but we have spun our wheels so much on the village board around things about, oh, let's throw it back. You have all the information, I think, in order to make a decision. I'd love to see you make one tonight. Thank you.
Okay, I have Therese and then Eric, I believe.
Eric, you want to go first? Right, so what I'm hearing here is we have a shortage of 8 spaces if you use the math of 1.75 or 1.5. And then anyone in this apartment can apply for on-street parking. So that's not the concern. The concern is these 8 spaces. And so I'm really struggling with what's the point if everybody else can get on-street parking that doesn't have it? What's 8 more? Does it flip the switch for all the 13 points to no longer meet the special exceptions for 8 more parking spots when 40 more people can get permits the next day? So what is it that we're really deliberating here? It seems very small and very simple.
I think maybe my question was confusing. I didn't know if anyone could apply. And because if it is, then I agree, their 8 spots don't really matter, because then everyone in the building could apply for 2, 3, whatever spots they need, right? So then we just have to look at the potential increase in parking within that area. Besides, subtracting what the developer has provided that building, right? So that's a different question, which I didn't understand with regard to who could apply for a parking spot, right? So the number is different if anyone in the building could apply for a spot. That was my question.
So it's 2 per household, right, Bart?
The code requires 1.75 per unit.
But the permits, you can get 2 per household. So apartment,
That is correct, Sarah, yes.
3A can get 2 parking spots, right?
That is correct.
So 80 more spots. This is what I'm hearing.
Bart, is it correct? We're really giving 2 exceptions tonight. One is a reduction from the code from the required 74 spaces. And the second is that the spaces that are not provided once that reduction is made, to not make them have to park within the garage. So I mean, we're talking about, if we just went on village code, by village code, we're going to be short 31 spaces. Let's say every single person, in an apartment had a car, a couple that lived in a 2-bedroom apartment each had a car. So just based on village code, what the building provides is 31 fewer spaces per code. So we're approving the reduction in the spaces needed, and that the spaces do not all have to be in the garage, that some can be on the street. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, I think Nathan or Attorney Bayer for that clarification. Correct. In this district, there's a requirement of the number, and in this district, there's a requirement they be in an enclosed garage. So any motion to accept or deny this would need to take those both into consideration, that A, you're willing to accept the lesser restrictions and not require them to be in the garage, or vice versa.
I was just based upon my math, it's the 74 would be required under the 1.75 parking spaces per dwelling unit, and what they're requesting is 51. So it's
well, they're requesting
20.
40. They're requesting 43 and suggesting that the 8 other to meet their expectations would be met by the village permit.
Right, well, right, exactly. Okay, so it's
So
43 would be on site and they're asking for permission to have 8 essentially be street parking.
And I think to this conversation, they wouldn't even have to ask for that because anyone right now in the village can have 2 per household unit. So just trying to clarify where I'm coming from on that perspective. I see Eric still with his hand up.
yeah, so
And I was,
said,
I wasn't finished yet, Eric. So
oh, go ahead.
if the other commissioners feel that they have enough information tonight, I'll withdraw my motion to defer if you want to go ahead and proceed this evening. But I just wanted to make sure that we understood, what the code says they're supposed to have and what the building will have. So it's really 31 maximum possible fewer spaces. But,
I just have,
I can withdraw my motion.
I just have one question. So setting aside the scolding that we just received, correct me if I'm wrong, but changing the code would be a function of the village board changing the code from 1.75 to whatever they wanted it to be. Is that correct?
Correct. The village board would need to make that change.
And so if they had made that change in any of the number of years they've existed, we wouldn't be having to continue to do this again and again. Would that also be correct?
Sure. Whatever's adopted is what I bring to you, right?
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Right, and I think that's why we have, and one of our initiatives for this coming year is to look at these requirements, whether it's a business or another property for off-street parking, because that's why, every time a small business moves into an existing building, there aren't enough parking spaces per code. And so our plan is to look at that this year.
No, I understand that. I just don't appreciate being lectured when the things that we are being called, to decide are a function of another government body not fulfilling their obligations. So, that's my point on that.
Therese, your hand is still up. Is that just from previous raising? Otherwise, I don't see any hands at the moment.
How does this work? Because we had a second. Can she withdraw it still, or do we have to vote?
I can withdraw my second. I personally would rather we just all vote on the deferment, but I'll withdraw my second if she wants to withdraw her motion.
Okay, sounds like that they were both deferred, withdrawn. So there's no motion on the table right now.
All right. I will make a motion. If that's okay.
Yep, go ahead.
I move to approve the parking special exemption for proposed multifamily redevelopment at properties 2418, 2420, and 2428 East Capitol Drive, submitted by Catalyst Partners, based on meeting the conditions stated in 535-51B.
And I'll second that.
Okay. You have a motion and a second.
Is there any further discussion from any non-commissioners? Bart?
No one has their hand raised.
Nobody, no neighbors or anybody who didn't write an email?
Correct.
Okay.
And so if there's no further discussion, Trustee Stokebrand, we could do a roll call on this one if you prefer. Or we can take more discussion as well. I'll defer to you on that. I think you're muted still.
Sorry, thank you. If no one has any further discussion, then Crystal, Ms. Kapodlowski, would you please call the roll for Bart?
Sure, I can call roll. Trustee Stokebrand,
Aye.
Eric Kudo,
No.
Therese Klein,
Yes.
Barbara Kiley Miller,
Aye.
Sangeeta Patel,
Aye.
Dan Wickland.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, to 1. It passed.
What? Well,
Okay, thank you all for the healthy discussion. Tom, I'll be in touch to confirm the next steps with respect to your application, but looks like it passed here tonight at the Plan Commission.
Again, thank you for your discussion and your questions. Thank you. Good night.
Right.
And Trustee Stokbrand, I also informed Nathan that he could leave after this item as well. So
Okay, thank you.
for now.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Good luck with the rest of your agenda. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Okay, Bart, then we're off to number 4, updated draft, review the
Yep.
updated draft.
Yeah, so I anticipated that would be the bulk of our conversation tonight, and quite honestly, not much has changed since we discussed the goals, objectives, and recommendations last time beyond the formatting of the document. I will share my screen briefly to point out the 2 maps that were inserted, because I know those are pretty relevant with respect to and is heading. So just for reference sake, here's the new cover. And so I've already had a few questions. If you have any comments or questions on the formatting of the document, I can also be happy to receive those and pass those along. If you have photos you'd like to share or comments on any of the layouts, et cetera, that's all in play right now. The goal is to have the draft formatted in early March so that we can distribute it widely in anticipation of the March 17th open house, which we'll talk about. But since the last drafting, and I don't know, the colors don't appear great in my screen, so I hope they're better on yours. I don't know. Since the last drafting, I was able to go in through the help of our GIS consultant and perform some mapping. So this is an existing land use map. So this just documents as of 2021 what is on each individual parcel, whether it's low density, medium density, higher density, commercial, mixed use, institutional, et cetera. So this is just kind of a snapshot of where we're at and how that interplays with the future land use map. This was referenced in the discussion earlier tonight. So the purple that we see, the Plan Commission discussed, I want to say back in September of October last year, their preferred boundaries for the residential or mixed Main Street mixed use. So the initial draft of this that Vandewaal had shared had the red central core district going up further north. Based on your discussion, we've modified that. So we're showing the Main Street mixed use, everything north of Capitol on Oakland, and then extending eastward on Capitol to the commercial properties as well there. We reduced the central core neighborhood to that central block. And then we extended the residential mixed use on the southern end of the village to capture Oakland Avenue there. And then on the west, the blue area represents what is being described as the suburban mixed use, I believe, area. So those are the 4 general areas of land use. Now, each of those are described within the plan on individual pages. I have them printed, but not in front of me. I believe it's like 172 or something. So what this means is the color it's identified would need to generally meet the description of that district. However, as I'll point out again, the zoning is currently what dictates what can or cannot be developed there. So the first step here is to identify these kind of general districts. And then based on adoption of the plan with those districts, the Plan Commission, the village board, anyone who's looking for an ordinance rezone or rechange would need to conform to that. So ideally, if we do go forward with a form-based code or something like that, that would once again reference back to here. So this is kind of the guiding principle, but the zoning is the specific language on that. So I just wanted to share this map. If you have any comments or questions on this, I see Eric has his hand raised. I'm happy to take questions on the comprehensive plan process in and of itself. I don't have much other than this map to share tonight, but Eric, go ahead.
Sure, thanks, Bart. I'm looking at, it'd be Lake Bluff in Oakland. It's the North Shore Bank property.
Sure, yep.
So there's a residential parcel that is on the other side of you just made me lose it. There we go. That's on the other side of the alley, that little purple rectangle. Is there a reason that single family home was included?
That's actually the parking. So there's parking east of that alley, directly off of the alley that's also owned by.
Okay. Okay. Yep. Nope. I got you.
Unless for some reason I get it wrong, I'll double check, but that is.
No. Nope. It's right outside my house. I'm just double
Gotcha.
checking. I appreciate it.
Yep. Nope. It's not the house. Barbara, I see your hand raised as well.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier the only comments I really had to offer were regarding the photos. And I think these are all with the chapter headings. So like on page 4 of the plan, we're showing a photo of that, I don't know, is this a lobster or some kind of sea animal over the door of William Ho's. And since that was announced at the restaurant, just announced recently, the restaurant was closing, I thought we might want to pick something else to illustrate that page.
Taken, yep. I have not been able to review the photos specifically, but I have my own thoughts on them as well.
Okay, and then I think it's the very same block. It's on page 79 that it shows some parked cars along the curb of that block and another car pulling into a parking space. And if you zoom in a little bit, you can read the license numbers on those cars. And so I think anytime an identifying number like that is shown, we should, I'm sure there's a way to do it. I've seen it done before. Blur out those license plate numbers in the photo. On page 25, or on page 125, I think we're just talking about development, and what it's showing is that 4-story apartment building that's just east of St. Robert's. And so I wasn't sure. And then in the background, you can kind of see the spot where the new building that we just approved is, or just approved parking for is going to go in. So I wasn't sure if that was supposed to illustrate, yeah, this is an older apartment that could use some redevelopment. But if not, I thought maybe we want to replace that with a photo of the cornerstone to illustrate, some redevelopment project that has been successful, in recent memory. And then lastly, on page 150, I think that's the chapter on intergovernmental cooperation. I'm not sure why the photos used are in there, because they don't have anything to do with intergovernmental cooperation. So I suggest we use photos, either maybe a village hall, and then there's 2 of them, and then also either the North Shore Health Department or the North Shore Fire Department. Perhaps our new fire station would be a good one to put in there along with village hall. So those are my only comments.
Nope, I agree with all of those. I think the consultant had a limited selection based on a couple of days of site visits. We at Village Hall have a larger library. It's just I haven't been able to direct them to change some of that stuff. So thank you for the specific comment. Sure. Trustee Stokebrand? You're still muted.
Sorry. As I was going through the document, I was wondering, some of the things were hard to see on the screen. So are we mostly formatting this for online? Like, will any of them be published at all? Or if the focus is online, then obviously we have to work with this graphic designer for Vanderwall because we're not meeting the standard. For example, future land use, I can't see any of these, and I've got my new glasses on. I can't see any of these categories, but that's a detail. I wondered, we talked on one of the, let's see, page 128 or so, limited, we talk about, assets and liabilities or something about limited tools. It was like a weakness listed, but then other places we list all the tools we have. And so I guess I was not certain, do we need to come to any sort of have a discussion or an agreement about the tools we use? I think it was on page 128. Do we consider ourselves, it's like a TIF policy, we now have one, so that's clearly a tool we didn't have before. On the other hand, we're a small village. Do we not have a lot of tools to offer? I'm sorry, I'm trying to go back to my screen here from the, are you able to go to page 128?
Yep, if you give me a second, I can try to pull it up here.
Of the packet.
Oh, of the packet or of the plan?
That's a good question.
It's probably in the plan is my.
I'm sorry, the plan.
Yeah, let me. I've made a note to look at the wording on 128 with respect to tools, just to confirm where we're coming from on that. I don't have it offhand memorized where that's.
Okay, I must have used the link. And I have a bunch of other stuff that I had seen that I thought was problematic. There were references to high character that we're looking for on Oakland Avenue. which, it sounds elitist and high character atmosphere on Oakland, and I was wondering what that meant. We talked about, we wanted to do things that didn't include disruption. I take disruption very literally after last summer, disruption in Shorewood. And so I just wondered if we needed to, I think it was under intergovernmental, we want to work together but not do anything that's disruptive. And I just wonder if that was a traffic pattern issue. Obviously with the civil unrest this summer, I see things through a different lens. So what's the best way to do this? Do you want us to just each, as we work through the document, send you a list and you go through them all yourself?
Yeah, I mean, if you have specific comments like that, I would love to get them and talk them over with Jackie. To one of Barbara's points earlier, a lot of this hasn't changed. So to read it for the 5th or 6th time, I hope you don't get bored with it. But we are to the point where we're really, really close to getting a final document. And I think now is the time, if you have those specific questions, whether it's the tone or the wording of how some things are, I'd be happy to work with Jackie to fix them. So any commissioner that has individual thoughts, I'd be happy to receive them by email within the next week or two. Like I said, I still have some maps to give Jackie, and then I'll probably be readjusting some photos and whatnot. So the goal, depending on how my time is allocated over the next couple of weeks, is to get this done early March for wide distribution. So if you have those comments that we can fix before the public open house, I'd be happy to take them into consideration.
And so what is your feeling about the online document versus printed? Will we have any printed, or will it all totally be online?
There will be printed copies, definitely at Village Hall and the library specifically. If you can think of other places where you'd like to place a copy of it, we can totally do that. With respect to the online, all of the maps will be higher resolution than what's currently available. So there'll be a separate link to click on them. So you'll be able to zoom in as close as you need to and adjust yourself on that. But yeah, it is formatted for 8.5 by 11 landscape document. Wording wise, that's fine, but we all know the maps are different. So those will be printed out at 11 by 17 and available as higher resolution maps online.
And so the keys would have to change proportionally, or it's worthless, right?
Yeah, I'd be happy to test that out with people as we get them, because they're actually formatted, I think, by 24 by 36, and then we just kind of shrink them down as we go because the file size is just too large to click on and wait for it to load. So I'd be happy to test run that, but we can always, adjust that in the future if we need to, if it's not readable on the screen.
I would think that the desktop publishing graphics person should be able to, make the keys adjust for the file.
Sure.
I mean, that should be all part of I had some really just basic issues with the design and the layout, the capitalization, things that were emphasized that were not worth emphasizing. I thought it was hard to read. Assets and issues at the bottom of the one, I think it was pages 12 and 13. You could hardly read them. Just basic readability issues and the photos. So I'll try to send that in a memo to you.
Sure. Yeah, I definitely wish that I had more time to work with this plan, but I didn't want to hold it up either by not sharing what I had in my hands. So
better to have something to start with.
Yeah, this is what I have, so I was happy to give it to you. It's definitely still the work in progress. The content is largely what we've already discussed, but now that we see it this way, things, might read differently. So I'm happy to take the comments in.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see if anyone else has any questions on this at the moment. I'm not seeing anyone. Oh, Barbara's your hand raised. Is that from something else? Nope, looks like it's down now.
Sorry, I'll lower that.
So yeah, with respect to the comp plan, that's all I really had right now is working with you to get it to the draft where we can present it on the 17th. If we can move on to item number 5, that is the open house that we're talking about. So I polled the plan commission at last meeting, after last meeting, before this meeting, to get that date because Jackie from Vanderwall needed to get in her calendar and me to start promoting it. So we've started with the village manager's memo and I believe social media posts. We will try our best to get the word out there. Like I said, the draft plan should be available early March. That's when I want to have the biggest push so that people aren't reviewing a draft and coming on the 17th, fixing something that's already been fixed, right? So I wish I could work faster on this. I'm stretched in a lot of different directions right now. So Patience is appreciated, but we've got that date scheduled, so we will have it done before then for sure. I will keep you posted where we're at with the draft. Yeah,
So what would be your goal if we have tinkering and edits? If
I
today,
would say by the end of February, get it to me if at all possible.
and will Vanderwall have their graphic person available to you to make changes? You won't have to do them to the document yourself that will go live online. I mean, what's the deadline for open records law? If we want to have the open house on the 17th, how many days ahead of time does that document in that final draft need to be available?
It's not required to be available. I mean, it's a virtual open house. We could choose to unveil it at the meeting if we wanted to.
Oh,
That's not how I prefer to do it. So I would like, I'd like to have it out there probably for 2 weeks prior to that. Maybe a week if I'm going to be more honest with my time. But yeah, we're not bound by anything per se on that. And then just moving forward, March 23rd is your next meeting. That's when the Plan Commission would take in the comments of the 17th open house and then your own personal comments with a goal of, final comments and potential recommendation to the village board. But I don't want to rush the process by any means. So I'm trying to give it to you as early as I can to get everything in there. So yeah, the 17th is where we're hoping to get the most public feedback. And I know Vanderwall, I believe, is developing some specific questions to make sure that what's in here matches up with what the public's expecting.
and so is that pretty much the end of the Vanderwall contract would be March 23rd?
No, so there's a public hearing at the village board before consideration. So they'll also present at that meeting.
And that could be the April 5 meeting?
I believe more likely the April 19th meeting, but anything's possible, I suppose. I just wouldn't expect the 5th.
Okay, thank you. Do you need anything else then from us on item number 5?
Nope, yep, both items 5 and 6 were just kind of 4 and 5 were just keeping you in a loop on where we're at with that.
Okay, thank you. And did anyone have any questions? And we'll move on to number 6. Annual report and future initiatives.
Yep, so we discussed this at our January meeting. I believe I've made all the updates that were requested. I added the green code updates. So as you'll see, parking is in there as well. So we've got a lot on our plate. The first thing that we need to get through is this comp plan. And like I've discussed in the past, we get through that, we will definitely reconvene on implementation to see which one you would like to proceed with first, and just confirm that on all fronts that's the initiative that's preferred. So I can share those again if you'd like. I see Barbara's got her hand raised.
Just a couple of things. Reading the minutes from last month, I saw that President Rozek said that the village board had added to our priority list reviewing the solar approval process and finding a way to fast track that. So I thought we need to add that, maybe in position number 8. Because that was in the minutes.
Just from a staff perspective, sorry, I know that's already in the village manager's to-do list, so it doesn't need to be added to a list per se because it's already on a work plan. That's kind of how we function.
Okay.
She was expecting to bring that in February here, and then we've gotten busy with other things. So I'm sure that's right around the corner, quite honestly.
Oh, okay. So it doesn't need to be added to this document. And then since we just talked about this, once the board passes the comp plan in its final version or edited version, the next step really should be looking at that zoning map, because the comp plan, is wonderful by itself, but it's the zoning map and code that kind of rules everything, isn't it? So maybe we can swap the off-street parking requirements, revisions or review, put that in number 2 and move the zoning map and code up higher. Or, there's number 4 and number 6 also have to do with zoning code. So I'm not sure if we want to group those together or have them in sequence near the beginning.
Yeah, I know we discussed this as a priority list last time, and
Yeah.
I struggle with doing that because I think priorities change as we go. So I'm happy that the whole list is out there, and we'll definitely discuss and debate and select things once the comp plan is there. If you'd like me to swap them around, I'm happy to do so. I don't necessarily have that much weight into the numbering system right now. you're more than welcome to pick 7 when we get to that point if you want to. You're not bound by the numerical listing.
And I totally realize that I'm contradicting myself because last month I said, let's put some of those things that we can quickly get off our list first. So that we don't get to the end of the year and only did like, 2 or 3 things. But
Right. So
whatever
I
you-
think we can have that conversation when we get to it. I wouldn't put too much weight on the numbers right now.
Okay, thank you.
If you'd like, we can. Eric, I think you might be next.
Yeah, as a matter of curiosity, for this document, for the village board, would it be safe to assume that the revamping of the parking code is in there under one of their priorities for 2021?
I don't believe it is. I'd have to ask the village manager. She maintains, so the village board actually submits their own, the trustees submit their own initiatives, and then it's compiled.
Have you seen any initiatives that have been submitted regarding revamping of the parking codes?
They have not submitted their initiatives for this year yet either, no. So
Okay.
I have not seen what they would have submitted.
I look forward to seeing that in there somewhere.
And trustee Brand, do you have your hand raised still?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with, from the 6 months I've been on the board. I don't see anything about, the big thing was the overnight parking and alternate side. I don't remember seeing any initiatives on off-street parking requirements, if that's what you're asking about, number 1. And my question would be, so where does form-based zoning fit into all of this? Is it part of every discussion as we work through 1 through 7, or when do we start to discuss this new philosophy and if and when and how it will implement it?
Sure, it would, in my mind, it would be a component of numbers 2, 5, and 6. So we would review the zoning map to confirm that the districts are accurate. Then with respect to 5 and 6, so I would be looking towards a hybrid form-based code. 6 relates specifically to design standards. So we looked at, they call it calibrating the code to meet your local context. And then 5, if we would have any desire to, and I think that we do, and I would suggest that we should, continue the hybrid approach of still listing permitted, conditional, and prohibited uses within that. So we would just confirm our current offerings and with a full update. So I think 2, 5, and 6 all interplay with form-based code.
Okay, and so that would be something we might be able to take up beginning in May or June?
Quite possibly, right? Yep. If the comp plan is adopted, our next meeting after that will be to discuss implementation. And so if that's the direction that I receive from the plan commission, I'll work with the village manager to get that into the appropriate work plans and timelines, and we'll see where we go from there. But once again, I serve other committees and whatnot, so we just got to make sure that what we plan for is realistic. But I look forward to that, quite honestly.
And so if you go to the form-based, does that reduce your reliance on a design review board? Or does it just take a different form?
How we currently use the design review board is largely for residential. We don't have a lot of commercial. So when commercial would come to them, it would make their reviews, I don't want to say easier, but more straightforward. They would know exactly what they're reviewing and confirming. But I don't anticipate the form-based code would impact our residential districts. We've got too much of a diversity in housing stock that I don't know that a form-based code is necessary for that. It's just a matter of maintaining that. So I think that will maintain to be their primary function is those kind of reviews. But the form-based code would make commercial reviews a lot more consistent and acceptable, I think.
Thank you.
Barbara, is your hand raised again?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Kathy's query about the alternate street side parking and so on. That really is not under the purview of the plan commission. This revised off-street parking requirements, that's for businesses. So like when the North Shore Bank or the Ruckus or the cycling exercise place came to us and they didn't have enough parking spaces per code for their number of employees they had or the square footage that their business had. That's what we wanted to look at, correct? It's not the residential parking, daytime, nighttime, what side of the street. That's the village board's kind of authority. We're looking at specifically at the code for what businesses need to provide or make available.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Anyone, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see y'all. I think we're good with this list unless I'm hearing differently. Like I said, the order to me is less important, but if you want me to switch things around, let me know. Any other questions on that? Otherwise, I will submit that. I believe they're all due. Each committee has theirs to be due by March 15th, and I believe we share them with the board after that. I don't know the exact date of when they'll see that, but I will give it to the village manager's office to distribute.
Okay, thank you. We're done with number 6 then, I believe. Moving on to number 7.
Anyone have anything for the future? I can share that we're expecting 2 conditional use applications in March and or April, depending on when they're received. So we'll be looking definitely to have meetings, if not for the comp plan, for those as well. So there will be some decisions in the near future on those. Not seeing anything else on that. I will also share, I believe as part of the village manager's report on March 1st, there will be a potential discussion about reopening aspects of village government to the public, whether that's village hall and or other buildings, and specifically with respect to this group meetings. I know I've heard at least an acceptance or perhaps an appreciation for the ability to do these virtual meetings. And so if there's any comments, otherwise I have shared that I believe my committees, CDA, CDA Plan Commission and Design Review Board have all transitioned pretty comfortably. But if you have opposition to that, I guess feel free to let me know on that. But that, I believe the board will be hearing that as part of the March 1st village manager's report. I will update how that goes.
I don't want to speak for the rest of the commission, but I am perfectly comfortable doing this virtually and appreciate the ability to continue to do that moving forward.
Yeah, I think that Eric seems just as angry virtually as in person. And I don't think my sarcasm translates over Zoom well. So I'm just
yeah, I've heard that same feedback from other committees. And so I think we've
about Dan. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, sure. I think we've all transitioned pretty well into this, and now that we're going, of course, we'll see if we have to revert back, but I don't know where it's going to go, quite honestly. I just thought I'd give you the heads up on that. If by chance it changes next month, I don't know.
You might think about how technology-wise you go forward being able to do both, that you have some people virtual and some people present. How are you going to do that?
Yep, I know Tyler in the village manager's office, I believe, so he's our IT kind of liaison. He is definitely discussing and working with that to see if a hybrid solution could be attained in the future. I don't think it's going to in the next month, but moving forward, I think this is kind of something that people have liked. But I'm getting too much into it, so
yeah, I think you need some sort of component to put the screen and make sure you have the audio and the video. If you could get a large screen in the committee room, is that where did the plan commission meet? Right in the courtroom. Oh, in the courtroom. Okay. Yep. So we need that there too then. I mean,
yeah, we haven't even met together, I guess, since we've gotten the new commissioners on board. So it's been a while.
I don't even know where to pick up my mail at Village Hall, which maybe is a good thing, right? Trustees don't get bills, do they? Anyway.
Well, being able to do this virtually has just been a godsend this winter. With a broken foot, I wouldn't have been able to attend. And what I think it's also been great for is we've had so many meetings over the years where we think that we're discussing a topic that will generate a lot of community interest or input, and nobody shows up. So we may not have had a lot of input tonight, but at least we have more people listening. And so if there's a way to, if we meet in person, still live stream it, so that if people want to jump in and say, hey, wait a minute, have you thought about this or whatever, get the best of both worlds.
I think from a public access standpoint, though, this is fantastic, because if somebody did want to show up tonight and can't get a babysitter or has to work or something, I mean, it's so easy to show up. I think that's the best part of it, and that's why it should continue. But
I would agree, unless you have someone who's not online. And for example, I have a parent who has no computer. So there are some people who don't have that access, but I agree. The hybrid clearly would be the best of both worlds, but until we have the right equipment at Village Hall, I think we're almost better doing all virtual.
And I think it works great for our consultants and developers who need to be present and they're coming from another city. You know, this really is more convenient for them.
Yep, so we'll see where that all goes. I don't know that there'll be any different direction, but I just thought I'd give you the heads up that I'm expecting that at the March 1st Village Managers Report. So
I'm sure Arc Electric would appreciate it.
solar panels. Yep.
So yeah, basically you want to hear any feedback on the comp plan by the end of the week, Bart, and then we have, hopefully you'll have the final draft online by perhaps March 10th. We have our open house March 17th, and we have a meeting on the 23rd. Does that recap it?
Yep, those are the next steps with the comp plan. So I will do my best to keep it pushing. If by chance I can't meet it, I'll be the first to let you know.
Okay, thank you. Are we ready for a motion to adjourn then? Does anyone have anything else, or I'll entertain a motion?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Bart. Thank you,
Okay.
everyone.
Thank you all. Have a good night. Let's hope spring comes soon.
Thanks,
Thank
Bart.
you.
Thank you, Crystal.